Hi.
Hi.
First of all, before you sharing your screen, I would like that you share with us a little bit of you and who are you, because you're gonna be talking not only for Brazil but maybe for many people in the world in this event. It's an event that really um, means about traditional aspects and also the revolutionary thing about this. And that's why we would like to talk about Latin spirits, because as we see it as a trendy thing, but also we see it as something that our people, Latin people, are putting a new meaning in afterwards.
Yeah, because we saw all the Latin American spirits and other beverages also that are the only spirits in the world that put a huge cultural aspects on its production and its consumption also. And so it's very important to give a light over this cultural matter of the spirits production.
So
Absolutely.
before of all, Erin, please introduce yourself and let Brazil and the world knows a little bit of you.
Okay, perfect. Hi, I'm Erin Rose. I am the bar director of a group of restaurants and bars in Bogota, Colombia, which is called Takami. And as part of my time here in Colombia, one of the things that I've worked on with a lot of my colleagues here is investigating Colombian spirits. Colombian spirits have been in a disadvantaged position because the Colombian government has a liquor monopoly. And so a lot of spirits that were being produced with local ingredients or in specific types of communities, for a long time, they weren't allowed to be produced legally, which is why you don't see, like Brazil has its cachaça and Mexico has tequila and mezcal, but the types of Colombian spirits that would be similar to cachaça or tequila and mezcal, at this point, they haven't been exported because the Colombian government has blocked that, but that's changing, so that's really exciting.
It is.
So
Very
part
good.
of the work that we've been doing is trying to give these spirits, like help these spirits get the recognition that they deserve, to try and open up that process of allowing them to be sold freely. And I think also, which Mauricio mentioned, a big part of that is assuring that the profits of those spirits go to the communities that are producing them and that have protected them all these years when it was really difficult to maintain those traditions, and not have it be also looking a little bit at the example of mezcal, that in some ways those products are taken from the communities that they were originally made in, and they aren't benefiting from their sale, is
Yes.
something that a lot of people here are kind of working to avoid with the legal definitions of those spirits, which I think is really cool, like focusing on them in their cultural role and not just as a product to be sold. So I think that's really important.
So sorry, I have like a
So much.
we are shaking here. I really didn't know about this monopoly and this how can I say this? They make the product stay in Colombia and not share with the world. And I think this conversation is going to be more interesting than ever because of it, and more challenge also. How are you going to explain something to us that you must feel to explain? So we are really excited about to know the tradition, the traditional aspects of production. I know already that you have a aguardiente, but actually I never tried one. And I know many places have spirits made from sugar cane, but each space has a difference between them. So how would you like to start about talking about Colombian booze? Would you like to talk to present us something. We'd love to hear about your research and also how you apply it in the knowledge, the products in your day by day.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think we can start with the presentation and then maybe I can talk a little bit about going beyond
Perfect.
in afterwards. So this is a version of a presentation that my friend Laura Hernandez and I did for Tales of the Cocktail last year. I've adjusted it a bit over the years. Well, you always end up learning more. And this is a category that's growing really fast here, so which is very happy to see. So I like to think of these spirits as, oh wait, let me make this present before I keep talking. View present. Okay, there we go. That's the nice version. Okay, so I think of this as we'll be traveling through Colombia through its spirits. I'm actually not going to talk about aguardiente today because most of the aguardientes that are produced in Colombia, they buy the alcohol outside of Colombia. They are not distilled in Colombia.
Really?
Yes, and they are part of the government production. So the Colombian government buys sugarcane distillates from Ecuador or Bolivia, and then they
Oh
make
my God.
I know.
Why?
I know. There are some complex reasons there. I think there's some reasons for economy of scale. There are reasons related to the fact that when aguardiente was being distilled in Colombia, there were some problems with environmental contamination
Oh my
because
God.
managing the distilleries responsibly. No, it's a big, complex theme, but most of the base alcohol of the aguardientes made in Colombia are not made from Colombian sugarcane. So today we actually are not going to talk about aguardiente.
This is revealing, a lot of revealing.
It's very revealing, I know. Well, and I think this is an important thing to talk about with any Latin American spirit is the difference between marketing and culture. Because I think it's very easy when outside of Colombia for marketers to say this is a Colombian product, yes, without defining what a Colombian product means. And I think for us, when we were looking at spirits with my friend, so my friend Laura and I, who did this together, she, with her mother, has a restaurant called Leo here in Bogota, which is the only Colombian restaurant on the 50 best list. And they've worked a lot with local spirits. And when we were defining this list, one thing we looked at was the idea of terroir, or in Spanish it's terruño, that we wanted products made where their base material was grown in Colombia, where it reflects a sense of place in Colombia, and that it wasn't just like Colombia's on the label or it was bottled in Colombia. That's a really important distinction for us. And that also that the producer was directly involved in the production and sale and definition of its product, which we also think is really important. So the products that we're going to look at today come from various parts of Colombia. I like to share this saying, which is actually from a tourist t-shirt, but I thought it captured Colombia really well, which is, if you want to walk through the Orinoco Plains, you can go to Venezuela. If you'd like to climb the Andes, you go to Peru. If you want to explore the Amazon, of course, you go to Brazil. If you like Caribbean beaches, you go to Aruba. And if you want it all, you come to Colombia. Because Colombia is right at the intersection of all those ecosystems. Brazil is the most biodiverse country in the world in number of species, but Colombia is the most biodiverse country in the world in number of density of species per square kilometer. So Colombia has this like amazing biodiversity that I think is reflected in these spirits that are made here. So this is a map of Colombia and a few of the spirits we're going to look at today. So we have Viche, which is a sugarcane distillate that has become increasingly important in the last few years in Colombia, or increasingly recognized. I think it's always been important. And then two liquors, herbal liquors that are made with Viche, Viche Curao, which means cured Viche, in Toma Seca. These are both from the Pacific coast of Colombia, which are manglar and rainforest ecosystems. also many of the communities where they just make these liquors, you can only reach by water access, by boat. There is no land access. So they've kind of had these cultures that have grown up in a sort of isolation. We're also going to look at 2 distillates from the Caribbean coast from a part of Colombia called La Guajira. And they are made with a distillate that's made with a base of panela, which is like an unrefined sugar. When you boil down sugarcane juice without refining it, I don't know how they would call that in Brazil, but I'm sure you have it.
Melado.
Sí.
Melado.
Perfect. So this, instead of being, viche is a sugarcane juice distillate like cachaça. Chirrinchi is a panela distillate.
Chirrinche. It's nice to say it.
Yeah, and this is and these particular chirrinchis are actually flavored with local fruits. This is a desert region of Colombia, a coastal desert, and these are distillates that are often made by the indigenous tribe that lives in this part of Colombia, which are called, their group is called Wayuu.
Great.
Then we come down to the Amazon. This is actually on our border with Brazil. A herbal liquor called chuchuasa, which actually with this liquor, they often buy cachaça from Brazil because it sits right at the intersection of Peru, Brazil, and Colombia.
Yes.
And then they infuse it with plants from the Amazon. The one that I most love is made by a Tecuna man called Emilio. So it's a really interesting process. We're going to see some photos of the barks that they use.
Please.
I would imagine the Tecuna communities in Brazil make something similar, but I don't know. And then we're going to look at some tropical fruit eau de vie, or fruit brandies, unaged fruit brandies from the mountains, from the Andean mountains close to Bogota. I think another thing that's really important to understand about Colombia is we don't really have seasons. The climate changes for your altitude. So where these fruit brandies are made, it is chilly all year round. It can get quite cold, it's foggy, it's very rainy. Bogota also is this way. And then of course on the coast, it's hot, it's humid. So those changes in altitude really affect the temperature. I mean, Bogota is 2,300 meters above sea level, so it's high.
It's really high.
It's really high.
It's really high.
And so those thermal floors completely change the climate. I think some people hear Colombia and they assume that, I'm living on the beach, which would be lovely, but it's not actually okay. And the ones from Huasca are really special because they get to these so close to these, it's even higher than Bogota, and they get to these high altitude ecosystems called páramos, which they only exist in Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia, where it's so high that trees don't even grow, but they're really important water collection sites for the rest of the country.
Interesting.
So really unique ecosystems in all of these distillates. So first we're going to talk about viche. Viche comes from the Bantu word bichi, which means immature or green, referring to a fruit. One thing that I think is really special about Colombian cuisine is that they don't just consider the fruit as one ingredient, but it's a different ingredient depending on what stage of ripeness it's in. So green papaya is different than a papaya that's already mature. A green mango is different than a ripe mango. That probably happens in Brazil too, I would imagine. And here they also think that way with sugarcane. So sometimes with viche, not all viches, they are made with sugarcane that is immature. It's not done as full maturation process. So it's green sugarcane juice, which is really unique.
Yes. Why?
Yes.
Why?
Yeah, I think it was part of the evolution process. Well, viche comes from an African language family, and these are made in the Afro-Colombian communities. And a lot of the communities on the Pacific coast of Colombia were actually founded by enslaved people who were escaping the Caribbean coast. They were running away and they hid in the forest, which is why these communities are often very hard to access. And so I think they retain certain aspects of African traditions that were brought with the enslaved people, and also words, terminology. But I don't know, it's really special. I've never heard of another.
It is.
Sugar
The green sugar cane possess less sugar
Yeah,
and more water
and more proteins.
and more
So
protein.
greener in the distillate, and it also won't ferment to as high a level of alcohol. The other thing that I think personally is really special about Vice is that the distilling was traditionally done by women, and
Yes.
Nice.
traditionally taught by women. So like one of the Vices that I most like that we're gonna look at was made by my friend Onesimo. He's a man, but he was taught by his grandmother. So the women are
This
kind
is
of
amazing.
tradition. Yeah, it's super, super special. So Vice is made along the Pacific coast in the Afro-Colombian communities. Some of the areas most known for Vice production are Rio Cajambre, which is a river that goes in from the Pacific here in kind of the middle of the coast. And then Tumaco, which is further down almost in the border with Ecuador. The Vice that I'm gonna show you guys is from Tumaco, or outside of Tumaco. It's not actually in the city proper. The production process, this is going to change a lot from community to community, because these are small communities doing small distillations, a lot like mezcal. Like this is not a universal rule, but when I went with Onesimo to see how it was made, this is how he makes it.
Okay.
So they harvest the sugar cane. They grow the sugarcane fields, like they clear up part of the forest and they grow in the middle of the forest. Some people will tell you that Vice is made with wild sugarcane, but wild sugarcane doesn't exist in the Americas.
Yes.
Anymore.
Anymore.
No.
Maybe in India, but I don't think it's wild. In the middle of the forest, maybe, but wild.
No, yeah, exactly. So I asked Onesimo, I think people get confused because some communities grow like this, like in the middle of the forest, and other plants grow in the middle of the field. But it's not wild. They cultivate it. And then obviously the sugarcane harvest process. Oh, one thing really cool that I liked about what Onesimo told me that seems like so simple, but yet kind of revolutionary, is we were walking by the fields and he was like, you can tell really easily if someone's using pesticides or agrochemicals on their sugarcane fields. And I was like, oh, okay, how's that? And he was like, are there other plants growing beneath the sugarcane? And it seems really obvious, but it's also like, oh yeah, because we walked by some of his neighbors' cultivates, and you notice that the ground around the sugarcane is brown, but in his, you can see there are all these plants growing up around it, and it's because he doesn't use agrochemicals on his which is really great. This is the traditional Colombian trapiche, a sugarcane press. It's all wooden,
Yes.
gears and everything, which is amazing. They usually use cows to push the press. I asked Onesimo because I had seen in Mexico like donkeys or horses, which is like in a way kind of like more picturesque, I guess. So I asked him, why horses? And he said, well, like when the cow doesn't want to push the press anymore, like you can eat it, which is practical.
No, it's practical. It's logic.
Yeah. The cow is not a big fan of pushing the sugarcane press. So
But do you know, we have a very dry region in Brazil. We call it sertão. It's no water at all. And the people who live there, they have all this sense of sustainability, but not because they were taught about it. It's just because they learn how to survive in the middle of it. And they don't lost anything. A sip of, como é que é soro? De leite. The water part of the milk, I forget the name in English, but they don't lose anything. And they normally have goats and chicken, because someday when in the middle and you don't have water at all, and of course you don't have any kind of supply to eat, because anything is growing without water, they kill those things. They take care between the middle is in the mid-season. It's something that is really well done, and they work like this. It's amazing.
Totally. Yeah, I've talked about that with friends of mine here too, that it's it's important. I think sometimes people from the US or Europe have an idea of sustainability very much based in
Technology.
yeah, technology and also kind of
Yeah,
consumerism.
and not to using poisons and chemical fertilizers in the ground, not the whole natural circle of life to be called
Sustainable.
sustainable.
Totally. And I think I lost my screen. I don't know.
You have just a few windows open, just a few.
Just a few. I know. I need to close. Where did it go? How did I do that? Okay, we'll edit this.
See if Alt tab you can find it maybe.
Okay, there we go. Yes. Okay, fixed it.
Got it?
Got it.
Aha.
Break
Great.
and we're back. I wanted to turn off the WhatsApp notifications because they were.
If you need to stop for answer something, that's no problem, because we are going to edit this video. So
Okay.
feel free to do whatever you need in the middle of something. No worries.
It's a big, that's an advantage.
Yes.
But yes, totally. And I think oftentimes there's not really an appreciation for the people who have kind of retained these traditional practices that are sustainable because they had to be, and not because they were trying.
They want to marketing this.
Yeah.
They just need to be. They learn like this.
They need to be like this to
produce more. Yeah.
Totally. Well, and I think.
And in Brazil, we also use cows.
Yeah, but some places they are changing the cows to motorcycles.
Yes.
Well, that's efficient too. It's like
they take off the front wheel of the motorcycle and wrap in the trapiche and then put the motorcycle to continue this run.
I would like to see that.
Yeah.
We call it here in Jeitinho Brasileiro. It's a manager with something like you never thought about. You have a motorcycle. Let's put this and see if it works. And works, doesn't need anything. It just fuel we put there. Something like this.
That's cool. I want to see that. Well, and I think that's also part of it too, is like it's good to retain traditional practices, but it's also important to let people innovate.
Yes.
Without limiting too much, because it can kind of, I don't know, it can become also something fake if you turn it into a theater of how it was 150 years ago instead of letting people grow and change.
This is really polemical subject, because we appreciate the traditional process, but also when you see yourself as a person, you always, we are always looking for getting better or produce more with more quality and develop something. So I think it's some kind of blindness if you don't appreciate also some kind of development between the producer, the harvest, because people think, oh, this year I have this problem, so how can I solve this next year? And the technology somehow, like motorcycle or whatever, it's always welcome.
It's totally. Well, and I also think in certain respects, it has to, I don't know. It is. It's a hard line, because you wanna make sure, or I think we all have this kind of respect for these traditions that have been preserved for so many years. But then I also think about who is allowed to innovate. Like, I think you see this a lot with chefs, that
Yes.
European and American chefs are allowed to cook Mexican food or fusion food or Thai food, and they can win prizes for that food done in the style of their country. But then I feel like those same organizations come to Colombia or come to Brazil and only want to give prizes to people who are cooking using Colombian ingredients or using Brazilian ingredients or making Brazilian or Colombian food. And it's like, how come a Colombian chef can't get a prize for Italian food when European,
Yes.
many of them have gotten prizes with Latin American ingredients? So like,
This
who's
is
allowed to
polemical.
innovate and who's allowed to evolve and who's sort of like kept in a certain type of box?
Yeah, I think it's colonized vision that we all have still. So that's the problem. They can do whatever they want, even with things they don't have it officially, but they come here, stud here, talk about it, about something they learned for someone from here, as they own those things. And that's, for me, is the problem. The traditional things are great, but also we have chefs that can develop, can have inspiration about our ingredients, and we just see those chefs winning prizes somehow, presenting the traditional way, or doesn't having prizes at all.
Totally. Well, and I think also, you know, when you and I did the original proposal for Tales, not this year, but last year,
Yes.
with the group of women we were working with, like, I think that was a bit of an eye opener for me because, you know, I'm American, but I've lived in Colombia now for several years. And, you know, I kind of had this idea, seeing that the proposals were opening up or looking actively for other participants, that I wanted to hear the voices of you and our friend from Peru and our friend from Venezuela, like women who are actually from these countries and living in these countries, talking about their spirits, which you never see at those conferences. It's always
Yes.
Americans and Europeans presenting Latin American spirits. And then when I did the proposal, the response that they gave me initially, and I had to fight to get them to include Laura, is like, why don't you come alone and do it? And it's like, that defeats the whole point.
Yes, it's completely different what I suggest. So
Right.
I imagine how you feel. And we don't see a lot of Latin people or other place people between, although American and European people talking in tales. We just see mainly white men, beard people.
Totally. And I mean, and I think also there's a certain, like, I mean, obviously as someone who has moved and fallen in love with the products of another country, I know how that can happen, but it might feel more fair if you had like a Brazilian person presenting about Scotch whiskey just to keep things even.
Yes,
But that never
doesn't
happened.
make sense at all.
It only goes
Yes, and
like,
and it's not like some kind of, how can I say, like make you angry if you see American talking about Latin spirits. It's just okay.
yeah. Well, and I
It's-
think it's very frustrating to see only Americans talking about Latin spirits. Like,
yes,
for the number of Latin spirits that have been presented in these past few years at Tales, and to have so few Latino folks in those panels, is, it makes you sad. It makes me mad, and I'm not even
yes,
the
makes me mad too.
um
So
but
we must change it.
yeah. Well, and I think
So
when you
would you like
live,
to continue?
yes. Oh wait,
See if you can share with
let
us.
me share or make me the host. No sé dónde está.
Are you allowed to share?
Let me see. Oh, todavía no.
Tem que sair do modo. Enfim, peraí.
Não tem. Are you?
No. Do you want to make me the host again?
I did already. That's the funny thing. Let's see. You are host, or maybe Yes, I'm not the host anymore.
I think
Oh,
Mauricio.
Mauricio is the host.
I'm the host.
Sorry, I put him. Forgot. Sorry.
No, that's
Wait,
okay.
seconds. And then you pass the host to her. Tornar anfitriã. Isso, isso. Now we got it. Okay.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
They have-
Great.
Perfect. Okay, so
Okay.
gain extraction. Chatted about that.
Yes.
And then infinite pictures of the cow.
What is in its face? They blind the cow before.
No, what happens is he puts his horns against the wood.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
Is here
To have attraction.
Yeah, to have traction. Here, I'll show you.
Yes.
Yeah, because
Oh,
he's
so
like
different.
this part of his head.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, here in Brazil is a little different. They put a
bra.
wooden piece on the neck. Yeah, on the neck of the cow. And then it
Nicer
pulls.
for the cow, actually. I'm not sure to have it here. But yeah, oh,
Okay.
he has a cushion for the front of his head. That's true.
Yeah.
Here. So fermentation, viche is a wild fermentation. They use yeast that are present in the environment. And then one thing that I thought was really interesting that I had never seen in spirits is they use kind of like a mother to start the fermentation. So this stuff that looks like mud in the bottom of the fermentation tub is kind of like a kombucha starter. It's
Yes.
of yeast and then when he's not using it, he covers it with water. And then if it starts to stick to the sides of the container, he knows that the culture isn't healthy anymore and he throws it out and starts over. But they're using like a kind of culture to start every batch of fermentation, which I thought was really interesting. And then usually, I mean, this is a hot tropical climate. It's a super fast fermentation, 3 to 4 days. Some people, especially if they're using green sugarcane juice, do a secondary fermentation, adding melau, which is like the sugarcane syrup. Or they use another batch of fermented cane juice to kick restart the fermentation and get it to a higher level of alcohol. And then this is distilling. He's actually slightly modified his still since then, but you can see that it's this is actually his own design, which this part of the still is kind of like a giant steel cooking pot, but designed it to be double walled, which not everyone uses. Onesimo is he studied engineering and he is very smart. He does a lot of modifications to his own still, which is one of the reasons that I really like working with him. He's very creative and always like looking to make small adjustments. But so he designed this still. Some of the stills are even more rustic than this one. And then you can see they use the dried sugarcane. They call it here bagasso. I don't know exactly what it would be in English.
Here too.
Okay. They use that as fuel.
Bagas in English.
Yeah, that's right. That they use that dried as the fuel for the still, burning below. And then this is his condenser, which is
whoa,
amazing technology.
Yeah,
it's great.
Actually, he uses copper for his condenser after reading about, which is also a bit unusual because a lot of people just use normal steel tubes because they're cheaper. But Onesimo is very nerdy about his distillation. About him.
But does he know why he use copper?
Oh yeah, he read about it. In Tumaco, where he lives, they call him the professor because he's always reading and sending articles. And he read about it and read that copper was better. So he's also looking, hopefully to change his fermentation tub back to the classic wooden tub, which they stopped using for price reasons, but I think he's going to try and go back. At the turn of the century, it was common to ferment in wooden tubs like mezcal. But
This is interesting
stick tubs,
because we have a lot of similarities with cachaça, obviously. And the copper is something that we use a lot, not in the industrial ones that goes all around the world, but 90% of the producers uses copper. And also the wooden fermentation. We used to use this long time ago, and the parts of the like rules and legal process to do the cachaça forbidden the wood. That's a sad part. Brazil is not very good with tradition and doesn't understand a lot of things. So they say, so do it in the still, because there's no contamination in the still. But the wood was like in the middle of some environmental place and brings a lot of things important, much important than they still.
Yeah, it's easy to cut off the wood, to tell the producers to use the wood, then teach them to use the wood in the right way. So they forbidden and say you can only use stainless steel, and they don't tell that the most important thing is to clean it.
Instead to forbidden.
Instead forbidden wasn't teach them to clean it well, to don't have a contamination. No, they don't want to teach. They just forbidden and tell them to use stainless steel.
Yes, that's that part. Let's continue with this amazing producer.
No, but I think it's really parallel. Well, Vice has never had legal recognition in Colombia. It started to in the past few years. And I think these are some of the discussions that we're having around it, which I think also, as you mentioned, Isadora, go back to colonial themes, which is this kind of idea that like everything has to be modern or steel or imported or controlled or sanitized to be acceptable.
Yes.
And then that ends up like they're having to do a whole different process to get what's like a health code approval. They're having to create a totally separate one for Vice because the current health code wouldn't allow any of these traditional practices. So it's like, how do we create a health code that allows certain practices, but like done well? And I think that's something that has been also a lot. I mean, Latin America is a fountain of resources for the rest of the world, like in so many products. But I think part of that colonial process here was that it took the resources without teaching people how to manage them, because the Europeans and Americans wanted to retain control of those resources. In my personal opinion,
we share of it. We this event, the Naturebas, started with only wine in the traditional and how can I say, like primitive way, and now it's already bigger, and we are talking about spirits also because we have a fermentation over there, and the Latin spirits somehow still conserves a little bit of the traditional process and behaviors. And the creator of this event says there's nothing more revolutionary than tradition. If you bring the tradition above everything, you're gonna learn a lot more and teach a lot more. So we're gonna share knowledge and somehow gain some kind of freedom.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. So gain a type of freedom. I like that. This is another still to show you kind of what a more primitive version of the Vice still would look like. You can see it's made out of
mud.
It's an old, no, it's like the gasoline cans. Well, it didn't have gasoline.
Like a tin.
A tin, okay.
And
And
then
around it, this black part, what is it?
it's burned. The outside of it has been burned by the fire, or like charred.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can see like the difference between this and the Stilla Bonesimo. I mean, this is also a discussion around Vice that needs to happen, which is like also how to make sure it's safe to drink, because there are Vices that are not necessarily, I mean, that are still made in ways
Dangerous.
that like, for instance, in some parts of the Pacific, they'll say that the heads of the distillate is the man's
Yes.
drink, which like nobody needs to be drinking that. Not
Yes,
or
here,
women.
here was the same.
The same here.
So I think that's also part of these discussions, is like how to protect and respect cultural traditions, but also make sure that like we've learned a lot about what's safe and what's not in the last bit of our human history, so that's important.
Yes.
So now we're coming to herbal liqueurs, which are its own wonderful category here in Colombia, I think due to the many medicinal plants that grow here. Viche is used as the base for a lot of these liquors in the Pacific communities. And as I said, the women are usually the ones making these mixes and acting as kind of the doctors, in a certain sense, healers of their communities.
Does it have a name for them? A specific name for those women?
You know, I don't know one. I mean, a lot of the parteras, the midwives, use these distillates, but not just the parteras. And
Okay.
one thing that's really nice about the way that they talk about these spirits is they're very integrated into the idea of sort of a whole cycle of life. So there's specific versions of infusions that are for fertility. There's a whole group of aphrodisiac infusions that have names like bed and then there are also like toma seca, which you see here, which is called the women's drink, that's usually sweetened and has 25 to 30 plants, and every maker has her own recipe. It was created to kind of go with women's fertility cycles, to help with menstrual cramps, and then they also drink it after they've given birth to help heal the womb. So I think like that for me is also really revolutionary, like thinking about medicinal spirits, and not just medicinal in the tradition of Western medicine, but these traditions that come from women's traditional knowledge. And in this case, Afro-Latino women's traditional knowledge that they've kept and developed over the years. And I think, you know, in one part that's really lovely and kind of almost romantic in a sense, but I think it's also important to talk about the part that is not really lovely and romantic, which is in these communities, they have 4 to 5 times higher maternal mortality than in a city like Bogota, because they have much less access to medical treatment. And so in a way, I think part of the reason that these traditions have maintained themselves is because they had to take care of themselves.
Yes.
And in a way that's really, I mean, there's a part of it that's amazing and there's a part of it that's really sad.
Yes, that's something we read and research a lot about behavior and history. And actually a lot of that or died after the birth, because there was not medical instruments, and also the following growth in the belly. So there's a lot of things that before the technology we don't have to how to assess, and of course women and babies died. And the thing you point that they needed to take care as they could. So it's something that we must enhance. Maybe if we could take a look and share and blend those things, we're gonna have a lot of women and babies healthier and lives because of it. Because this knowledge is something that I'm passionate about, and it really works. It's something that really works. If you drink out, we call here garrafada.
Garrafas.
It's something in the bottle, garrafa, so garrafada. That's why I ask it. And the women and the men also, I call it mateiros.
Mateiros.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think, well, and I think we've gotten so accustomed in bars and coming from Western cultures, like, you know that there are stories about these liquors that are medicinal, but you don't really think of them that way anymore. But I think alcohol still plays a really important role in medicine in a lot of places. And there are things that we could learn from that. Like, I think, and also I think when I've had visiting bartenders ask me about these drinks, they tend to, I think not out of bad intentions, but they tend to treat them as like, oh, that's really cute, or like, it's nice that they believe that, like it's kind of a type of magic, but it may not be
Superstition.
true. Yeah, a superstition. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. But you know, like in Vice Curau, one of the things they say is that it's good for snake bites. And I was like, and I had that problem too. Like, I was like, oh, like that's a really interesting story, just a story. But I was researching, and actually a lot of the plants they use to infuse Vice Curau, they do prevent, if you're bitten. So the snake that most snake bites causes in Colombia is, I think it's called a pit nose viper in English. They're the snakes with the flat heads
I
that
don't
have
know.
really,
I don't know the name.
Coral.
yeah.
Não,
They're,
mas aquela arma, como que chama?
yeah, they have like a flat
Dente.
head
The
where,
teeth. Yeah, coral
yeah,
viper.
they're really dangerous. They're very venomous.
Yeah.
So many of the plants they use in the Pacific, they did tests, and a lot of those plants stop the different, because they're actually, their venom acts on you in various different ways. One part of it affects your blood, one part of it affects your neural processing.
Yeah.
Yeah, nervous system.
And those infusions in alcohol actually can stop those effects. So they actually do treat the venom of those snakes, and it's documented.
Great.
So it's, I think sometimes for being so caught up in our ways of doing medicine that we sometimes forget that those medicines work.
And they were already working much
Yeah.
much time ago, a long time ago.
Well, and that those, it's kind of like the wasps that evolved for a certain type of fruit. Those plants evolved in an ecosystem where those vipers existed. And so they kind of, the system grows up together. It's not independent one thing of the other. But I thought that was so amazing. I was reading that paper and just
It is. It makes sense because the environment grows together. Something, all those things are connected to the others, including in humans.
Yeah.
Including humans. Yeah, we forget it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the problem. We see ourselves as something higher or in the different that doesn't belong to the forest or the path. We just have like concrete and buildings. We are not like this.
Yes, but we need to think as the human being start to invade the forest, to invade the natural habitat of the vipers, there starts to have a more cases of biting or apparitions of vipers, and then they need to know how to treat the bites, to heal the bites and neutralize the poison.
But they already knew. And the thing is that the European and the Occidental medicine, they did something like this. Okay, you are indigenous, you don't know nothing. I know everything. Let me deal with this. I can solve. And the guy died, of course. But the indigenous people already knew how to deal with the hurt.
Yes.
Okay, Sophie.
Definitely. So this is one Vice Curau made by Doña Sophie. Her family lives in Rio Cajambre. So you can see her on the back. It's talking about some of the things that I was talking about, that they use it for to alleviate ailments that are physical and spiritual, which I think is also nice, recognizing that connection. and also to give you energy, which I think this is beautiful too, like thinking about medicine, not only to treat what's wrong with you, but to help you be well. Like,
Yes.
it's not just something that works against bad, but actively helps you create good feelings. And then these are some of the other, so this is actually Doña Sophie here in the
She's
earlier.
beautiful.
Yeah, and I think this is also a nice story of hopefully the peace process in Colombia doesn't, it's had some setbacks this year, but doesn't get screwed up, because she actually moved to Cali, which is the closest big city to Rio Cajamarca, because of the war, because also all of these regions were really, really affected by Colombia's civil war. And then, like, since in the past 10, 20 years that started to calm down, there was, the peace accord was signed in 2016. It was easier to start working with her family who still lived back in Rio Cajamarca and bringing Viche to the cities. And hopefully, I mean, if the civil war starts again, it'll set a lot of these processes really far back. And the current president hasn't been very supportive of the peace process, so hopefully that will change. But for now, everybody's doing their best. Hopefully. This is another brand called Don Be. These are some of the traditional aphrodisiac liqueurs, which are made with fruits and coconut cream. This one means like horny, and then this one so these are what you drink before a night with your your partner.
Horny.
Yeah, no, very clear what they're for. We're gonna travel a bit down through the forests of Colombia now into the Amazon, to look at chuchuwasa, which is infused with Amazonian barks and vines instead of the plants of the Pacific coasts. I'm sure you guys have chuchuwasa trees in Brazil. I don't know how they would be called in Portuguese.
We don't know also, maybe because we have garrafadas, and it's all over Brazil. But there in Amazonia, you have a lot of this behavior. Many families produce the garrafadas for many reasons, like the horny is one of them.
Universal human things.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the human people looking for two things: eat and eat. So it's something like this.
Totally. And this one may be the third human thing, which is pain killing. The bark, they say the bark of this tree, this Amazonian tree, has pain killing properties. They also use a type of vine that tastes like clove, so they call it clavo de monte, but it's not actually, it's a giant vine. I'll show it to you in a
giant clove.
Yeah. Morure, which is another type of bark from a tree, sometimes cinnamon. And then they sweeten it with honey from the Amazon forest, which is really beautiful. So this is Emilio, who makes the chuchuwasa that I buy, and Lucia, who's his granddaughter. They run a little shop out of their house. And then this is Emilio showing me, so he sells it to you in these recycled Coca-Cola bottles. And then this is where he keeps the bark in the back in his sort of like work area. Chuchuwasa trees, the bark varies from male to female trees. So the bark of the female tree is different from the male tree, which is what he's showing me in this photo. The one in his left hand, well, looking at him, is the female tree, and the other is the male tree. And then this is Chuchuwasa morure, the other bark, here in the hand, that's used in fusion. And this giant vine is the clavo de monte, which tastes like clove, but is not a clove. Usually one of his neighbors had taken it out and planted it near their house, but usually this is a vine they go deeper into the forest to take. Okay, and I think we're coming to fruit distillates. So the fruit distillates that I've seen in Colombia are Asawa from Riohacha, which is this region of La Guajira, and they're using this typical base, this panela distillate, as we talked about earlier, that's commonly drunk in Wayu communities to celebrate births, when someone dies, kind of incorporated into these rituals of community. Chirrinchi is a word that in Colombian Spanish has a lot of baggage because it's, a lot of people use it here as like a negative term for a distillate of bad quality. So like it can be used, instead of being used as a technical term for this type of panela distillate, it can be used as a term for like cheap, bad alcohol. But I think people are kind of trying to change that. I don't know if this happens in Brazil, but here in Colombia, you see a certain perception still that imported things are
better.
I'm loving this conversation because we have so much in common, and I'm gonna Google all those things to see how it are they like physically, because I'm sure we have this in Brazil also. The prejudice, I think it's all over. We have cachaça is the thing that is more how can I say, is not well seen by the people. The most people doesn't understand what it is, and also doesn't like before try it.
Yeah, as Chirrinchi, we have the pinga. Pinga is a nickname for the cachaça, but it's also a name that people use to nominate the bad liquor, the
bad spirit.
The bad spirits.
Totally. No, it's very similar. Well, and
I think very good.
That process, that like the kind of process of celebrating South American cultures is kind of moving away from that idea that everything that's produced here is of lesser quality.
Yes. It's a process, but there's not so many people talking about this with examples. You see, cachaça is a strength that we have, but also a weakness. And I think all those culture things and good producers things that you and us have are good examples, but we must make a deep dive with the person that we are talking about. It's not something as we see in French wine, for example. In the restaurants, you say it's French, might be good or not, but you say it's French, okay, bring it. It's a different thing.
Totally. No, it definitely happens. Yeah, we have to, and it's also that like evaluating each producer by their merits and not thinking one category is all bad or all good, because they're good and bad in everything.
Yes, we are going to be without time. If you call off, I send you another link.
Okay, we'll try it, and if not, then we'll have another link.
Yes.
So two liquors they make the panela distillate infused with a fruit of the palm that is called corozo. It's like a red. It kind of looks like a cherry. There's not a name for that in English. There might be one in Brazil.
We have it. O fruto da palmeira, do Jussara, não. Como é que os meninos fizeram isso? I'm gonna remember, but we have here. It's like a lot of coconuts together.
Yeah, but they're red and they kind of look like
cherry. Yes.
And then they also make, as they're in the desert, another, like, it's almost kind of an Aperol, but a Colombian Aperol that's infused with a cactus fruit called iguaraya.
Interesting.
The next page. Yeah, very cool. Very interesting. So this is an iguaraya. Actually, I have this bottle. I'm going to run and get it to show you guys.
This is the fruit?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the fruit. Well, that's the fruit of the aperitif. The corozo looks different. It's smaller. And then this is the bottle, which I think is
nice.
Really cool. And then
the process is really similar.
Yeah, the process. Oops, I skipped ahead. Let me go back. So the difference is the liquor made with corozo is higher alcohol and it's not very sweet, and then the aperitivo with the iguaraya is sweeter. because they sweeten it, and it's also lower. It's like 11-12%, like an Aperol.
Okay.
And then the other fruit distillates, which are some of, I think, the best distillates that I've tried anywhere, are made by my friends in Huasca, so they're a Venezuelan family. There are a lot of Venezuelans living in Colombia because of the political situation in Venezuela. But they are actually like their great grandpa was German, and they still have family in Germany. So they wanted to make unaged fruit brandies, or eau de vie, like the ones that you see in Germany and Austria, which are typically made with cherries or pear, the fruits, plums.
Like a schnapps.
Like a schnapps, yeah, but not sweetened. Yeah. So they kind of had this tradition in the back of their mind of those fruit distillates from this part of Europe, but they wanted to do them with tropical fruits, which I think is where it got really interesting and cool.
Yes, makes sense. At least makes sense.
It makes sense. Yeah, so they have a really special still, which we're going to see on the next page. So they do one single distillation, and they have this really slow fermentation process because, as we talked about, this is the very high Andean mountains. It is chilly.
Nice.
So the fermentation is super slow. And they actually use a special yeast from Germany that's designed to ferment at lower temperatures. And so they have this beautiful still, and they
amazing.
They make these really wonderful fruit brandies. This is Feijó, which is one of my favorites, that are super aromatic. And they use all tropical fruits. Really beautiful.
Nice. Is it guava?
It's similar, but I think Feijó is in the same family, though. I'd have to double check. But they're small and they're green, and they're super aromatic. But these tend to grow in slightly colder climates. So I don't know if in Brazil there are. Here they grow like a little bit higher up than a normal guava.
Okay.
Really floral.
Interesting.
Here, we're going to see them on the second page. So this is the Feijó arriving to they do other fruits.
It's not a guava.
I love the Feijoas. So
what is the name of the fruit?
Feijó.
Feijó.
They smell wonderful. So this is them arriving. They're getting a bath. This is fermenting. But they also do pineapple. They have one of orange. They do uchuva, which I think also there is in Brazil, like the golden berry. I'm not sure.
You're gonna have to send me all the pictures of the fruits so we can research the scientific name to see.
Okay, I will look it up for you so you can see. But wonderful distillates, really groundbreaking, I think. And I think this is a good example of when you bring different traditions together, like something new can bloom that's really beautiful. Because this is not a traditional Colombian distillate, but they're using like some really wonderful Colombian products to make these absolutely unique things.
And the Latin countries have it. We were invaded and we receive a lot of people from many places.
Of immigrants.
So it's kind of part of us, the blending thing. We learn, we develop, we adapt. Look at us. We all different between faces. Our faces and eyes and mouth and body is completely mixed.
Yeah, and
you are blonde.
It's interesting to see that they take the German tradition and the German technology, but they search to do a local thing.
Yes.
With taking the traditional ways of production to a more modern way of production and put them together to make a unique spirit.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And I think you see more and more people doing this, like spirits without category or outside of categories, like empirical spirits in Copenhagen.
Yes, they are great.
They are great.
But I think we have a great time with Rodrigo in the beginning of the year, just before the pandemic.
Yes.
And they make wonderful spirits, and they just call it spirits.
Yeah, and I love that because it doesn't limit you in certain respects. Like you can kind of open the horizons on what a spirit can be. And I
Yes.
also think so many ingredients you find in our countries. I mean, there's not even words for that in English. You know, all the passion fruits in English, it's just one word, like maracuja or or
Yes.
kuruba. There's not different words in English. Like you can't even.
No, and they are not the same fruit.
And they are not the same fruit. There's a whole range of fruits, and it's like, so I think, like in a way, just trying to create these spirits that reflect the diversity of Latin America is already you're working outside of category, because
Yeah,
we have so
because
many.
the categories were created by Europeans or Americans. It's impossible to fit in the same place. We have a lot of cultural and historical behavior that doesn't fit in the same box. So we must have this like shout out for our legacy, because it's ours, not theirs. That's the problem. We must not fit in their categories.
Yeah, and here in Brazil, for instance, we have a lot of different fruits for natural fruits from Brazil that almost disappear because as the Europeans don't know the fruits, they donate it. They don't use it. And so it almost disappear. And now there are some people that are trying to
restore
the tradition of the consumption of these Brazilian fruits.
This is a Brazilian vermouth. It's our child. It's a vermouth made from a berry, Brazilian berry called jabuticaba. I don't know if you heard about it. It's almost a grape, but larger and sweeter.
And black.
And black.
And black.
And the color is amazing. You must come, or we must come really, really soon to see you. You're gonna be passionate about it.
Oh, I would love to come, and I would love for you guys to come see me. I think, well, I really only have one more slide after the Feijó, but it's a good, if you're interested in following these producers and people who work with these distillates and Instagram, you know, I think Laura and I did some work collecting this information and organizing it, but really a lot of the work that has gone into these spirits was done by these people, these restaurants, these music festivals. I have an organization of Colombian midwives there that work a lot in the Pacific with these distillates. So if you want to learn more about the culture around Colombian spirits, you can follow all of these great folks.
Please.
Great, we will.
Who have also been are always incredibly generous with their time and knowledge. I would also say that at some point we try to organize a Spanish and Portuguese version of a conference. I'd be happy to connect you guys with some.
Oh, for sure. I think we have so much in similarity and behavior, not only by the producers, but also the people. And I'm really interested to know, as you are a bartender and take care of people and drinks, how do you manage to blend all those things together? For example, how do you use all those beverages in your day by day and make people connect or somehow interested about trying and having this experience with these spirits?
Well, I think there are a few. It also depends on the form, not the format I'm in, but like the type of space I'm in. For example, in our restaurants and bars, one of the ways I try to get people to try new spirits is to put them in a context that they understand. So, for example, I had a version of a mojito in one of my menus, which is always a crowd pleaser, that was viche infused with chuchuwasa, which kind of brings two cultures together, or two parts of Colombia together. And I think I deliberately chose a cocktail that was super easy to understand and very popular so that more people would try it, because I think sometimes you kind of have to depend, if you're working in a space that's more commercial, you kind of have to pick your battles. Like if you
Yes.
go right off the bat to making a Negroni or an old fashioned with vice and also a chichuasa, like that cocktail could be really interesting and beautiful, but it might not sell so much. And so sometimes
Yes.
I try to put the spirits in contexts that are a little bit easier for people to understand while they get used to them. Another project I did here with some friends of mine who opened a tejo, which is a Colombian game where you throw like almost hockey pucks at a
Mhm.
at a board full of sand and with little like gunpowder shots, and if you hit them they go off.
Oh my
Very,
God. This is really fun. I must play it.
you must play it, and it's based in games that certain indigenous groups of Colombia played before the conquest. So it's a very old tradition in Colombia. So they opened this space that was a tejo, but like they wanted to sort of make it into kind of like a modern a tejo for our generation. And for example, one of the cocktails I did for them, because they wanted to work with a lot of Colombian spirits, was kind of a version of a spritz, but made with that cactus aperitivo instead of Aperol or something similar.
Great.
So in spaces like that, I kind of try to ease people into it. But I've also, like at Bogota Food and Wine last year, which is a big food and wine festival here, it was kind of a space where you knew that people were coming who are more interested in Colombian gastronomy. And so that I could really go all out on certain drinks. And so, I mean, those drinks, like I had one that I really loved that I've also done with tequila and mezcal for other events, which had viche, coca leaf from Nariño. So it had an infusion of coca leaf, fresh ginger from the forest, all Colombian ingredients, a type of lime called limon mandarino, which is it's like a lime, but they're orange inside. I think.
Okay, maybe it's
Capeta.
capeta. We call it capeta.
See, and they
Yeah.
smell very like almost floral. They're very nice.
Yeah, it's more like an orange than a lime. Is you have the acid part, but it's really really floral.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
love this.
Me too. I do too. And that's something that's used, for example, in some of the rural parts of Colombia to make lemonade or agua de panela. But it wasn't something you saw until recently, kind of like coming out in the cities. And I think what you said, Mauricio, that also happened in Colombia, that those kind of local fruits were kind of subjugated in a way to the fruits that were seen as appealing to the colonizers. And I mean, that
Yeah.
even happened in the United States. I think because the United States became in its own way a colonial power, people forget that. But I mean, the native fruits of the United States were not apples and pears. They were pawpaw and other fruits that people
For
are
sure.
working to bring back, but that were also kind of wiped out by the process of colonization there. Not wiped out, luckily, but they were kind of
Yes,
lost.
somehow we must understand this. They were colonized also, and the native people from US is like this, and they didn't blend as we did
Yeah,
so much.
I think, yeah, it's an interesting story, the similarities and differences between all the American countries.
Yes,
Um,
we don't consider the Latin Americans as we are Latin. We have a lot of similarity. The American from US, they are just European for us. They are nothing similarity for with us besides the tobacco.
besides the tobacco. Well, and I think that's an interesting point you bring up, because I think a lot of Americans feel that way about America, that the way that America, like the US, not America overall, but the way that the US defines who is American and who isn't is based
Yes,
on who is white enough to pass. But
Mhm.
there have been, I mean, where I grew up in New Mexico was colonized by the Spanish. it wasn't, there have been Spanish speaking people in the US since, I mean, since
Since ever.
Since ever.
and then, and also like the history of the indigenous peoples, the history of slavery. And I think like a lot of the protests right now in the US and the around Black Lives Matter is also challenging that definition. Like all of these,
For sure.
our countries, all of our countries have these shared histories. And I think also in Latin America, like that's a discussion too that I've been seeing here in Colombia, is like those same types of privilege for people who seem whiter exist here in Latin America.
Yes, we have a knowledge and also a mistaken behavior that we really doesn't understand how it was created, but it's some kind of mechanical. You don't, a lot of people doesn't think, they just do. If the guy in the street in the middle of the night is white, okay, if he's black, it's different. So you have this kind of prejudice, like roots in your day by day. It's difficult, and I think we are changing, yes, but we are talking about this last week with a friend, but we are not going to see this change. Is the change day by day change is something that you really didn't realize you are taking,
that is going on, yeah.
but in the end of a long period, you're gonna realize how different it was.
It's definitely, it's very true. Well, and I wonder, I think also that's why it's important for me. I don't know how you guys feel, but I think I felt when I started to talk about these spirits, like it often makes people uncomfortable to talk about the political aspects or to talk about maternal mortality rates in Afro-Colombian communities, or to talk about political differences. I mean, to talk about the history that the US has had with Colombia, which is an incredibly violent neo-colonial, like the war on drugs was in its own way kind of a type of colonization. And I think it makes people uncomfortable talking about those spirits because they want to have spirits as like this kind of space apart where everyone celebrates and everyone dances. And like, I think that is part of spirits, but I also think you can't talk about spirits in the Americas without talking about those political forces because they're so connected. I mean, I also think like,
yes, all the beverage and foods, they are connected with political aspects. It's impossible to separate it.
Totally. And I think also like who gets credit for certain beverages, like I think the history and the role of Afro Latinos or Afro Americans in distilling, from bourbon to rum to cachaça to the viche here in Colombia. Like I think that's something that really people in the spirits world don't talk about much. But like a lot of the people who developed those distilling techniques with sugarcane were enslaved people. And so, and I think, and that's not talking about like who did the actual work, which I think everyone knows that it was enslaved people, although they don't always like to talk about it. But it's like, it wasn't just a term of like who was cutting down the cane. A lot of the techniques and intellectual developments of rum came from enslaved people. And I think like it's still hard for us to kind of talk about that. And maybe also because there's not a lot of documentation. But
yes, there is no documentation. We have this issue here also, and I think the people got kind of, how can I say, bothered with the subject, because if we are going to talk about vodka, for example, nobody speaks about the Russian Revolution that was like a massacre of people. No, we just talk about vodka. It's something that is beyond this already. So, but once we have all these beverages, all these spirits that still remain traditional and connected with the local culture, you're gonna to have to talk about the issue they live, why they continue to produce it, why they didn't change for something different, and why they didn't put this like it's a party in the castle. It's not a party in the castle. You are in the path, in the middle of the woods, in the middle of the forest. It's really, really raw. So it's important to keep it alive, otherwise it's gonna die. As many things we have already died in Brazil, this culture and this beverage is something that doesn't exist anymore. Just died. We knew and that something like this was done once in the time, but nowadays there's no one doing it.
And people here in Brazil, when talk about cachaça, they forget that the sugarcane industry, and Brazil is still
First,
the first producer of sugar in the world, but this industry was built on the slave workers.
right.
And once it don't happen anymore, they forget that it happens.
Yeah.
And we must not forget. And we must to give this fact the real value that
This
it,
labor, yeah.
this kind of labor and the history, the real value that they should have been nominated to.
For sure, and something that we share, you and us, we develop this work. We do a lot of consulting for many bars and restaurants, bringing the knowledge and another ways of using something they have around them. Uh, is a really beautiful changing of they teach us something and we develop that teaching, that knowledge in something else to allow it to be sold, because we know the commercial thing is important. I may do a lot of things different, but the place must sell it. The people there must be somehow be connected with a familiar taste, with a familiar looking, and develop this is that point that we were saying in the beginning, is the changing that all these beverages must have also, because we are the connection between the producer and the bars and restaurants, and of course
The consumer.
the consumer. So this path is still really raw as the same the beverage. So this speech must be analyzed and maybe say it in a different way.
Definitely. Yeah, it's almost, I think if it's done well, it's almost a type of translation.
Yes.
But I also think that's really hard. I mean, part of the reason a couple of people have asked me, because they know I really love these spirits, why I haven't tried to start a brand or so. And it's like, I almost feel uncomfortable putting myself in that space. Like, I'm happy to help promote them and use them. But it's also like, I wanted, if I were to do it, which I'm not sure I'm going to, I would want to make sure that I was doing it in a way where I was collaborating, but I wasn't taking over, because I think it's so easy for these things to kind of get turned into kind of like gringo or European perspective.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, I think part of the process of sort of protecting, or not just protecting, like allowing South American cultures their fullest expression, or not allowing, but like is that the people who are making them are fully dictating that process. That it's not just
Yeah, we understand. We have the same issue. That's why we don't have a cachaça brand. We have a vermouth that's when we did it, nobody did it before. So we decided to do, because many producers of cachaça that we say do it,
Don't want to.
they want to, they doesn't want it. So we decided, oh, let's do it, and we did it. Now we have 4 or 5 brands of Brazilian vermouth. That in Brazil is not considered really vermouth. It's just aperitif or a mixed beverage. But it's lovely. It's amazing. You must try it as soon as possible.
I can't wait to try it. And you guys, well, I'll have to bring you a selection. But I'm glad to. It's also nice to feel like we're doing it together, like trying to find a path, all of us together. That's like a way to do it that's respectful. That makes sense.
Yes. The Força Latina is getting higher, I think. It's getting bigger.
It is.
It's growing.
Yeah.
It's fermenting.
It's fermenting. We see many places. We must connect. If we have the force of Brazilian, of Colombian, of Mexicans pushing Peruvian, pushing some kind of issue and forcing some kind of decisions, maybe we may be allowed to preserve all those things because we are connected in the same issues of traditional producers. So why doesn't to get put all together to put some pressure to avoid some kind of legal statement or some kind of process that doesn't help to keep the tradition alive? We must be connected and we must talk more.
I agree. Well, and I think I was talking actually to the ambassador in Montelobos, or now she's not, but of Casa Lumbre. And like, we also, I think it'd be really cool to all write a book together, like a collaborative book, because
Yes.
there are books coming out, but they're only written from one perspective. And like, how amazing that everyone from each country could write about some of the spirits from their country and have like a collaborative sort of
For sure.
encyclopedia
For
of
sure. And go deeper because I don't know, one people writing about all the spirits, it's not going to be so deeper as I write about cachaça with him, you about all those Brazilian or the Colombian spirits. You live this. You are connected with them. It's different than just visit.
It's different. Well, and I think that's also the difference and the importance of having people who live in the countries that they're being produced is like, you see the social implications. Like, it's not just a nice visit and you see the beautiful
Yes.
just visiting, everything seems beautiful. But like, I think you have to live in the place to understand, or like, I think it changes how you talk about spirits to also see that the social struggles around many of these things, and not just, you know, have like the postcard, the happy postcard part.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not just about the spirits and production techniques.
Yeah, exactly.
You have the whole social issue, the whole cultural issues,
And
environmental issues, and that sometimes are of a huge interference on the final product.
They have. It's the terroir.
Yeah.
Yes, it's true because first of all the producers are agriculture people. They deal with the land. They harvest. They do all those things before produce anything. So I think it's important to see this point, how they deal and how they live with this. The agricultural place is the main is the basic, okay?
The base.
The basis of every country. So it's the point. First before do booze, they do harvest. So
yeah, they are farmers.
They are farmers. It's important to see this point. They have all those issues, and the place normally have a lot of violence, not kind of cares at all. So it's important to realize all those things to understand in a completely full way what they live. I love all those things that you share with us, Erin. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for a time. Thank you for a knowledge.
The company, because you're lovely to be together.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for inviting me. It was an honor and also such a pleasure to talk with you. I hope we'll get to talk again, even not
personally soon.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing your knowledge with me. I learned a lot about Brazilian spirits today, so I love you.
We learn a lot of everything. Thank you for sharing all the how can I say?
Content, the
presentation, and also the names, the profiles of Instagram. Thank you very much.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you guys. Hope to see you soon.
So I'm going to translate this to Portuguese. If you would like that I share with you, just let me know, ok?
I would like it. I mean, I don't know Portuguese, but maybe I can pick up a little.
Okay, but this content is going to be with us and Naturebas, and you can use it. Maybe I'm gonna to edit, and then maybe I can send you the without any kind of the raw material and without the subject, the subtitles, so you can translate maybe to Spanish. I don't know if you'd like to do something like this, but
yeah,
it's a free content.
It would be, I think a lot of bartenders here would be interested in not only hearing the part that I shared in Spanish, but hearing what you guys were talking about with the similarities with Brazil. So yeah, maybe it would be nice to put Spanish subtitles. I have the presentation in Spanish. Maybe I could cut it in.
Yes.
But well, thank you guys so much. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you so
very
much.
It was amazing.
Soon you're gonna cheer together personally.
We will.
Thank you very much, Erin.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.